of humanity for all times, present and future. Liberalism did not flourish for more than a period of 15 years. It was born in 1830 from the reaction to the Holy Alliance, which attempted to set Europe back to the period which preceded '89 and had its years of splendor in 1848, when also Pius IX was a liberal. Its decadence began immediately afterwards. If 1848 was a year of light and poesy, 1849 was a year of weakness and tragedy. The Roman Republic was killed by another republic, the French Republic. In the same year, Marx issued his famous Manifesto of Communism. In 1851, Napoleon III made his anti-liberal coup d'etat and reigned over France until 1870. He was overthrown by a popular movement, following one of the greatest defeats registered in history. The victor was Bismarck, who always ignored the religion of liberty and its prophets. It is symptomatic that a people of high civilization like the Germans completely ignored the religion of liberty throughout the whole 19th century, with but one parenthesis, represented by that which was called the ridiculous Parliament of Frankfurt, which lasted one season. Germany realized its national unity outside of liberalism, against liberalism, a doctrine which seemed alien to the German spirit, essentially monarchical, since liberalism is a historical and logical antechamber of anarchy. The three wars of 1864, 1866, and 1870, conducted by liberals like Moltke and Bismarck, mark the three stages of German unity. As for Italian unity, liberalism played a very inferior part in the makeup of Mazzini and Garibaldi, who were not liberals. Without the intervention of the anti-liberal Napoleon, we would not have had Lombardy, and without help of the anti-liberal Bismarck, at Sadowa and Sedan, it is very likely that we would not have got Venice in 1866, or that we would have entered Rome in 1870. During the period of 1870 to 1915, the preachers of the new credo themselves denounced the twilight of their religion. It was beaten in the breach by decadence in literature. It was beaten in the open by decadence in practice. Activism, that is to say nationalism, futurism, fascism. The liberal century, after having accumulated an infinity of Gordian knots, sought to cut them in the hecatomb of the World War. Never did any religion impose such a terrible sacrifice. Have the gods of liberalism slaked their bloodthirst? Liberalism is now on the point of closing the doors of its departed temples, because nations feel that its agnosticism in the economic field, and its indifference in political and moral matters, causes, as it has already caused, the sure ruin of states. That is why all the political experiences of the contemporary world are anti-liberal, and it is supremely silly to seek to classify them as things outside of history, as if history were a hunting ground reserved to liberalism and its professors, as if liberalism were the last and incomparable word of civilization. 9. Fascism does not turn back. The fascist negation of socialism, of democracy, of liberalism, should not lead one to believe that fascism wishes to push the world back to where it was before 1879, the date accepted as the opening year of the demo-liberal century. One cannot turn back. The fascist doctrine has not chosen de Maistre for its prophet. Monarchical absolutism is a thing of the past, and so is the worship of the church power. Feudal privileges and divisions into impenetrable castes with no connection between them are also have-beens. The conception of fascist authority has nothing in common with the police. A party that totally rules a nation is a new chapter in history. References and comparisons are not possible. From the ruins of the socialist, liberal, and democratic doctrines, fascism picks those elements that still have a living value, keeps those that might be termed facts acquired by history, and rejects the rest, namely, the conception of a doctrine good for all times and all people. Admitting that the 19th century was a century of socialism, liberalism, and democracy is not said that the 20th century must also be the century of socialism, of liberalism, of democracy. Political doctrines pass on, but peoples remain. One may now think that this will be the century of authority, the century of the right wing, the century of fascism. If the 19th century was a century of the individual, liberalism signifies individualism, one may think that this will be the century of collectivism, the century of the state. It is perfectly logical that a new doctrine should utilize the vital elements of other doctrines. No doctrine was ever born entirely new and shining, never seen before. No doctrine can boast of absolute originality. Each doctrine is bound historically to doctrines which went before, to doctrines yet to come. Thus, the scientific socialism of Marx is bound to the utopian socialism of Fourier, of Owen, of Saint-Simon, Thus, the liberalism of 1800 is linked with the movement of 1700. Thus, democratic doctrines are bound to the encyclopedist. Each doctrine tends to direct human activity towards a definite object. But the activity of man reacts upon the doctrine, transforms it, and adapts it to new requirements, or overcomes it. Doctrine, therefore, should be an act of life, and not an academy of words. In this lie the pragmatic veins of fascism, its will to power, its will to be, its position with regards to violence, and its value. 10. The value and mission of the state. The capital point of the fascist doctrine is the conception of the state, its essence, the work to be accomplished, its final aims. In the conception of fascism, the state is an absolute before which individual and groups are relative. Individuals and groups are conceivable insomuch as they are in the state. The liberal state does not direct the movements and the material and spiritual evolution of collectivity, but limits itself to recording the results. The fascist state has its conscious conviction, a will of its own, and for this reason is called an ethical state. In 1929, at the first quinquennial assembly of the regime, I said, "In fascism, the state is not a night watchman, only occupied with the personal safety of the citizens, nor is it an organization with purely material aims, such as that of assuring a certain well-being and a comparatively easy social cohabitation. A board of directors would be quite sufficient to deal with this. It is not a purely political creation either, detached from the complex material realities of the life of individuals and of peoples. The state, as conceived and enacted by fascism, is a spiritual and moral fact, since it gives concrete form to the political, juridical, and economic organization of the country. Furthermore, this organization, as it rises and develops, is a manifestation of the spirit. The state is a safeguard of interior and exterior safety, but it is also the keeper and transmitter of the spirit of the people, as it was elaborated through the ages, in its language, customs, and beliefs. The state is not only the present, it is also the past, and above all, the future. The state, insomuch as it transcends the short limits of individual lives, represents the immanent conscience of the nation. The forms in which the state expresses itself are subject to changes, but the necessity for the state remains. It is the state which educates the citizens in civic virtues, gives them a consciousness of their mission, presses them towards unity. The state harmonizes their interests through justice, transmits to prosperity the attainments of thoughts, in science, in arts, in laws, in the solidarity of mankind. The state leads men from primitive tribal life to that highest expression of human power, which is empire, links up through the centuries the names of those who died to preserve its integrity or to obey its laws, holds up the memory of the leaders who increased its territory and of the geniuses who cast the light of glory upon it, as an example for future generations to follow. When the conception of the state declines and disintegrating or centrifugal tendencies prevail, whether of individuals or groups, then the national society is about to set. 11. The unity of the state and the contradictions of capitalism. From 1929 onwards to the present day, the universal political and economical evolution has still further strengthened the doctrinal positions. The giant who rules is the state. The one who can resolve the dramatic contradictions of capital is the state.